You're the Zoom expert, I think now. So we don't want to take up too much of your time. I'm sure you're about sick of being on here on
That's all right.
Zoom, but we appreciate you coming on. Obviously, we know a lot about your backstory as far as playing and coaching, but maybe not every coach around does. So kind of how we always start this thing is kind of let you give your football journey, your football background, if you will, from playing days to coaching and how that brought you to where you are now.
Okay. Well, actually, I'm originally from North Mississippi. Played at Ripley High School, Ripley Tigers. Graduated in '97. Came to Auburn in '97, and pretty much played every game as a freshman, as an offensive lineman. Got recruited as defensive line, played both ways, and my journey started with Rick Trickett. I'm pretty sure y'all might know that name. He said, if you want to have an opportunity to play in the NFL and play early, you got to come over here with me. He said, but one way or another, I'm going to get you over here, so you're not going to be on the D-line long. I just told him I wanted to play. I didn't want to sit on the bench, and any way or another I can get on the field. And he made that possible for me. I finished up my last 3 years with Coach Hugh Nall, and graduated early, finished my senior year, with just taking my senior project, got my degree in graphic design. And in 2002, got drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers in the first round, the 30th pick overall. Played until 2010. And once I retired, during the time while I was playing, I developed type 1 diabetes. And so when I retired, I became a patient ambassador, national patient ambassador for Novo Nordisk and JDRF and all the different communities related to the diabetes world. Did that for about 9-10 years. And decided I wanted to get into scouting. Scouting is something, the executive background is something I've always wanted to see and be a part of. I was just intrigued in how they built teams. And so I got into that, did that for a couple of years, did the scouting academy, and did a scouting internship with the Steelers. And all of a sudden, it's just that being on the grass and being at training camp really touched that nerve of being a coach. As a scout, you don't have an opportunity to have that hands-on experience and be a part of a player's life and help develop players. And everybody that I talked to, even the general manager, Kevin Colbert, told me, he said, look, you got to pick one of the two. You show some promises being in the scouting world, but you can't do both. And so I said, you know what, I got to give it a shot. And so had a couple conversations with Coach Malzahn. And then last year in January was when I officially started as an analyst and assistant to the offensive line coach. And I'm going on my second year now. So, we're trying to see where things go. And at some point, I'd love to have my own room. And either at the college level right now, I'm looking more at the professional level, but we'll see.
Well, he said you can't really do both, but almost you kind of can at the college level. I mean, you guys are scouting, and I don't know, and I'm kind of curious because all of the big schools that we hear about, the Auburns and Alabamas and all the big SEC schools, it seems like they've got 20 analysts on staff. What is your your role as an analyst? What are you guys allowed to do? I know the NCAA kind of keeps everything tied into a box, and these guys can do this and these guys can't. So what are you allowed to do as an analyst? What's an analyst allowed to do? Are you a part of any of the recruiting, probably breaking down film, but not actually talking to the guys? How does all that work for you?
Well, as an analyst, I have an opportunity to, I guess my role right now is to help with the national offensive linemen, all the guys that are national, the big guys. So I do a lot of breaking down film and looking at those guys. And then also once the Coach Malzahn say, hey, we targeting this guy, then I reach out to him on Twitter, talk to him back and forth with that. I'm allowed to text them, but I can't call them. They can call me and I can answer the phone and talk to them, but I can't reach out and call them. So it's like, hey, give me a call. And it's up to the player if he wants to call or not. If he does, then I try to have a conversation with him, gauge his interest, build some type of relationship with him, and then go from there. Do a lot of film watching. Like you said, and it's funny that you brought it up, is the Scouting Academy really prepared me for what I was getting into, because I would have been completely lost on what to look at, how to gauge a player, and the verbiage and how to break it down if I wouldn't have went through that about 2-year span of just doing the scouting classes and stuff like that. So it was actually a blessing in disguise, to be honest with you.
So what do you think? Because I hear a guy that's Super Bowl champion and first round draft pick and I obviously as just a high school coach and only played in college. I think of guys like that and think, well, they know just about everything there is to know about offensive line and what they'll be looking for an offensive lineman because they've been around so many great ones their whole career. What are some things then, even with all that background that you learned from the scouting academy that stick out to you now?
It's funny that you brought that up. It's amazing how much people would think that about players that made it to the level that I made it at. And you realize once you're put in that position, how much football you don't know. That was the reality check that I got. And I wanted that though, because I was taught how to read coverages as an offensive lineman. When we get in our stance, watching the defensive back end rotate and giving us an indication where the blitz and stuff were coming from. My O-line coach was Russ Grimm, and he taught us that. And I love that. And so that was something that I wanted to learn more about, being able to identify coverages and what they were in. And that way, when I did have an opportunity to coach, I could pass along to the players to make the game slow down for them. But I just didn't know how to verbalize it. You can talk about it, but you got to be able to teach it. It's difference between knowing to be able to play and being a good teacher. And so being able to verbalize it and getting a kid to understand it and talking to them at the level that they can comprehend, that's what makes a difference in a good coach. I mean, you can't just say, this is how I'm going to teach it. You got to learn it that way. You got to put it to them in a way that they can understand. And being in this position has really taught me that, learning how to teach the basics and then build on that. With the Scouting Academy, watching guys' first step when they're coming off the ball, hip roll, you can look at a guy, if I would have done it, and say, yeah, he can play. But really tell me how he can play snap to finish. Give me in words his feet, his hands, all that, and build a picture for somebody who can't see the film. That's what the Scouting Academy taught me from snap to finish. Is just that's how you put it out there to be able to evaluate players. And then you can really see the differences between player A and player B if you follow like the 5 basic traits that they have for offensive line.
Coach, do you think that, being on the offensive line and maybe since you're kind of dictated by the film you have, the quality of film, and then not only that, the number of offensive linemen, that maybe you're more apt to find, quote, some of those diamonds in the rough at some of those positions because maybe it does get overlooked and a lot of people don't know what they're looking for?
Yes. I question our scouting department all the time. It's guys, they say, hey, we think this. Now, and not saying, and the one thing I had to learn is that, yes, you played, but you don't know it all, and your opinion isn't any more important than anybody else's. But I'm just saying from what I've seen, and guys like Alan Faneca, who should be in the Hall of Fame right now, I've watched him play, and guys I played with, Jeff Hardins and some of the other Pro Bowl players, watching them, you can tell what a center is supposed to look like when he is firing off the ball, staying low, and he can pull and don't need nobody help reaching the 3 technique. But going to college, you really question those type of things. And they ask for my opinion and what I think. And I appreciate that because you played at the highest level. You got a better feel for it than we do. Yes, we've been looking at it, but what is your thoughts? Maybe we're missing something. I'm like, yeah, this guy ain't the most flexible in the world, but look at how he's coming off the ball and finishing. You can't teach finish. You can't teach effort. Yes, those are things that he's going to have to overcome, but I wasn't that flexible either. But I played wide open all the time, and that made up for some areas that I was deficient in.
So what about some guys like you out of high school that are killing it on defensive line, and you as a scout now are looking at that kid that's playing defensive line? What are you seeing in a kid like that says, hey, this could be an offensive lineman for us? Does that happen as much in high school football anymore? What are you seeing? Because you're not getting maybe any offensive line film depending on, how that school decides to work their kids.
Yeah, it's kind of tough when the kid doesn't play both ways. when all he's just playing is defensive line, is trying to translate into him being an offensive lineman. The one thing that I've learned from Rodney Garner, our D-line coach, is he points out guys to me like that a lot. He's like, hey, come check this guy out. This guy here, he's an okay defensive lineman, but I think he'll be a hell of an offensive lineman. You can tell when you see a guy, he doesn't have that sudden burst off the defensive line, and he's getting penetration every now and then, and he's more or less kind of stalemating the guys and falling off and making tackles. That's an offensive lineman right there. Defensive lineman, the good ones that are going to play, Coach Garner's going after Alabama, all those big schools are going after. Those guys are getting penetration. I mean, pretty much every play. And they run in sideline to sideline, and they stand out like a sore thumb on film. Those guys are obvious defensive linemen, but an offensive lineman, a kid that you're going to have to eventually convince that he could be very, very good on the other side of the ball. You look at his hand placement, his effort, and how he's running his feet. Yeah, that's good. But if he ain't in the backfield a lot, that's an offensive lineman waiting to happen. I mean, and it's hard, and that's the job is trying to convince them and do that. But what I tell them, I said, I'm a prime example of that. I was getting recruited by pretty much everybody as a defensive lineman, but a lot of folks told me I was going to get redshirted. I loved offense. I played offensive guard like I played defensive tackle. I was hitting everything that moved. And so I'm like, you can use that same aggression on offense, but you're going to be that much better because think about it. You get to think like a defensive lineman. You understand what they're thinking to a degree. So you can use that to your advantage. And so I try to help kids who don't necessarily want to hear it and show them the path that I have made it through. Not saying you're going to end up being a first-round pick because I didn't think I was either, but it's a possible opportunity because you still have some athletic ability that a defensive lineman has. You're just not that over-the-top type of guy.
Coach, now I've heard some rumors. So, Pittsburgh Steelers, when you guys were there, I'd heard, obviously you guys power run game, smash people downhill, a lot of gap scheme. I'd heard you guys would only run power one direction, and then maybe you'd run, counter the other direction. Is that something that's true? Again, I'd heard it from somebody. Or would you guys run, counter both ways and power both ways? And how did that kind of maybe, help you as a guard? Hey, I'm going to kick out on this play, or I'm going to be a down blocker on this play?
It really all depends on who we were playing, to be honest with you. If we had success against certain teams and we were better than them personnel-wise, we were going to wear that one side out. And it got towards the time before Alan Faneca left, we ran a whole lot of power with him because he was so good at it. And me and Max Starks and Willie Colon got really good at the double team, at the deuce block, and climbing to the linebacker. So there were cases where, that I would say in a lot of ways that was true. But when I first got there, the first few years, we went in every direction to try to keep teams off balance. One thing I liked about it is that I got to show my athletic ability, being able to get out on sweeps and pull and do things like that. So it became more one-sided once Bruce Arians became the offensive coordinator. It became more one-sided than when we had Mike Mularkey and Ken Wisenhunt.
All right, Coach. So the obvious question for me is, you go and you learn to scout. Did you ever go back, look at your own film? I know you've watched yourself, every day in practice, and looked at how to get yourself better. But did you ever go back and scout yourself, either your NFL film or your college film, and try to break down your own stuff?
Yes, I did. And let me tell you how disappointed I was. Oh, my gosh. Man, you think about, okay, man, I did pretty good in this game. And then I went back and looked at one of the games. I said, you might check this game out because I thought I played pretty good in this game. I was like, ooh, yeah, that wasn't very good right there. Oh, that was bad. Oh, I'd have cussed myself out right there on that. Oh, my goodness. So, yes, I have. And it's really hard because you don't want to. Because when you start kind of really learning what to look for, you're like, okay, that was the wrong step. I got away with it on that one. And just little stuff like that. Yes, it's hard to look at those things nowadays.
So in the NFL, you get some, obviously the cream of the crop as far as it comes to athletes. And I think us at high school level and probably even at college level, and it's a good thing, we're trying to get the right technique. We're trying to get everyone have this perfect technique. And then I think you put on some NFL film and you see, a freak at left tackle completely step underneath himself and then cross over and then gets the guy cut off. Everything you're telling your young guys not to do, but they don't have
Yes.
that athletic ability. So
Yes.
when you've got those guys like that, in college or when you're working with them in the NFL, do you just leave those guys alone that are that good, or do you still try to get some of that technique part out of them? If they're still getting it done with their athleticism.
You have to try to get them to buy into some type of technique, because the thing about it, there up at that level, that only gets you by for a few years when you're young. I tell all young guys I've had opportunity to be around when I came back in the off season, I said, once you hit about 26 years old, your body goes downhill quickly, especially when you're playing offensive, defensive line. Like you said, that freak of nature at left tackle who can do stuff, if he is blessed and not had a lot of injuries, he might make it to 30, maybe getting away with that. But for the most part, if you start getting dinged up, technique is what gets you by. Technique will continue to get you by, and athleticism will get you over the top. Yes, you're going to stand out for the first few years, but you're going to get in trouble a lot. When you hit about 26, 27 years old, that's when you start to decline, especially when you start getting banged up. Joe Thomas was a great left tackle, but the guy was a technician, though. He could do some stuff and get away with it when his technique wasn't that great, compared to a guy who didn't have no technique at all, who would give up getting blowed up in the backfield, but the next 3 or 4 plays, he looked like he didn't even have a bad play. But Joe Thomas, he could cover up all of that and then look amazing. So Jonathan Ogden and those guys still believed in technique. Larry Zerliner came in my last 2 years in Pittsburgh, and his big thing is he's like, I watched film of you guys before I got here, and all of y'all techniques suck. And it's as a professional, because that was like years 5 or 6 for me. And at that point, your head's kind of big and you're thinking, I'm okay. But you start to realize that, okay, you start getting beat up, you need that technique. I was dealing with diabetes, type 1, and I had ACLs and a couple shoulder issues. So I wasn't as strong and as physical as I was when I first got in the league. So I had to try to do better with my technique. And I got a little bit better towards the end, but if I had a chance to go back and do it all over again, I would really, really, really stay on myself about my technique and build those good habits early on in my career just to play better, because I know I could have when I look back at my film.
So is that something in the NFL when you're talking to a guy that's a 6-year, 7-year vet, or maybe even a 5-year, is that something an offensive line coach can sell to him, or is that something that an even older veteran offensive lineman needs to talk to him about, or it just depends on the guy?
You get it from both sides. The one thing, if you got a good group of older linemen, at least 2 or 3 guys, if you got that really one that everybody listens to and you see him working stuff after practice, that's where you get the young guys to buy in. It's hard to have to preach technique and get the group to buy in if you don't have older guys working things after practice. I saw that all the time with Jeff and Wayne Gandy and Alan Fanuc and Marvell Smith. I had a great group of old guys I came in with, and they were always working on stuff or looking at things to try to get better. So that made me want to be a part of the group. You got that many old guys working. Like you want to do that too. And so the O-line coach didn't have to really stress much with you. He could say something and he'd say it in front of the group so everybody heard it. And that way he's like, look, this is what your issues are. And he's like, I can help you, but he'll tell them, hey, Alan, help him out with that. And they'll do it for the most part.
Coach, you played for, some phenomenal head coaches, obviously with the Steelers, and they've had a really good run. Could you talk a little bit about, Coach Cowher, Coach Tomlin, the guys they've had, and then obviously some of the assistants, guys like Arians, how are they able to get, grown men on the same page? How would they kind of motivate and not really cross the line? I think you can maybe you say a few things, to a high school kid. It's like, hey, this is how it's done. But when you got guys that are, 30s, pushing 40 years old, sometimes it's a little bit different message you have to give those guys. How are those guys kind of masters of that?
Um, Building relationships. It's one of those things when in the NFL, you get a little bit more time outside the ball to get to know guys. And when you have a coach that has played the game, and especially one that has played your position, that was always big for me. When I had a coach that played my position and understood that things are not going to turn out the way you draw it up on the board. Those lines ain't moving. That circle ain't moving. But he taught me little things and tricks of the trade, and he could go back to his old film, even it might be grainy as all outdoors, but he could show me, hey, this is what I'm talking about. This is what we worked on. See how I was supposed to step this way, but because of this defensive lineman, he played it different. I had to make up for it by doing this. That made us buy into it, and that really made a difference for us. So you just, at that age, you got to get guys to understand that you are grown. I can't force you to do it, but you have so much untapped potential that you could be a great one. And I'm trying to help you in every possible way. So, and you just give them examples. I mean, to me, with those guys, it was just more of relationships than anything outside of football.
Is that where I think you see college going as well? I mean, I'm curious to ask you. I really don't know, but there are so many guys that are, famous for any other, word to use, almost famous even at the college level, and being able to transfer maybe to somewhere else and do some different things. I'm sure the college game has changed a little bit with how you communicate with those guys. Is that something that you've seen be a little bit more like the professional coaching as compared to maybe when you were going through college and playing at the college level?
Um, in my case, I feel like it could be better. The guys are so tied up with time nowadays, things that are pulling at them in 50,000 different directions. It's really hard to build an outside relationship with the guys because you know that they might have their schoolwork, they got their girlfriends, they got their own little extracurricular activities. When I was playing, we were always over either Coach Trickett's house or Coach Nall's house, hanging out, building relationships. We seeing his kids grow up. I know Coach Trickett kids from when they were like 3 and 4 years old, and now they're coaching teams. You know what I'm saying? And it's crazy because I remember those guys, and that really made us closer. And when he did chew us out, we knew that he loved us because he took care of us like he was our dad when we weren't at the field. And I just wish that we could do a better job of that at this college level, because I feel like that's what a lot of the kids are missing. A grown-up that will show them what a good father's like, husband, whatever it may be, and them actually getting to see it instead of you talking about it, because then they will play for you and they will listen to you and do what you ask them to do if you can show them your softer side.
I love that aspect of it, Coach. I think it makes such a big difference. And, I'm picturing it as you're saying it, when coaches had their family around, or I was at a coach's house with their families, when you see that example, it sticks with you. It's so powerful. And again, that was my favorite part about coaching the offensive line too. It just seemed like there was so many more opportunities. Hey, we're going to cook out, we're going to barbecue and we're going to do this. And at the same time, they were able to see you in a different setting. It's like, man, football is my life. I love football, but at the end of the day, this is the type of man I am, and this is the type of husband I'm going to be. And I hope all of you guys learn that first.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And whenever the opportunity presents itself, if it does, I'm going to try to do my best with that. And even as being an analyst, I try to build a relationship with the players that I'm around, get to know them, and talk to them and let them know my faults. I have no problem with putting my dirty laundry on the table and saying, hey, look, I was weak at this point in time at your age too. I made my mistakes, and this is what happens, and you got to live with those consequences. So that's the type of stuff that can change guys' lives. And so I'm more focused on that than more of the ball aspect, because football ends very quickly. Honestly, you played at Houston. Coach Brad, I don't know where you played ball at, but you know when you first got to Houston, it was like it happened yesterday. I remember when I first got to Auburn, when I drove up, walked out on the field, and they slapped Simmons across my forehead with that piece of tape. And my first day in Pittsburgh. And now that's all over with. And it goes quickly. So those are the type of things that you try to get the guys to realize to enjoy the time while you're in it. And don't be so dead set on, I got to get to the league, because you might not make it. You got to focus on the better stuff other than that.
That's a great point, and I think it's extremely hard to do. I think, man, when you're in it, it seems like it's everything. And it seemed like every month they'd have someone new come in and talk to us and say, hey, you're not, football's what you do. You're not a football player. And me as a young, dumb kid, I was like, that's just because you're not good enough at football. I am, and it is everything to me, and that's why I'm going to be great. And it almost wouldn't matter who told me that, But I also didn't necessarily get that much from my coaches. It was from other people that they would bring in. So I think, like you're saying, it's such an important thing to be able to talk about those guys. And probably a reason that whenever I got out of football, I had such a tough time figuring out who I was, what I was going to do, not what I was going to do, but even who I was as a person, now that football's over and it's not what I'm doing all the time.
Yeah. And that's the toughest part too. Honestly, you're not the only one. I went through a stage of that, like, okay, football was an identity. And I fought for years to not let it become my identity. I wanted people to see what was under the helmet. But when you don't start setting yourself up and you don't realize that your career could end any second, it's hard to adjust to what I call everyday life. Becoming an everyday normal human being, it is really tough. And so you got to try to have people to lean back on. So that's when I called my old O-line coach, guys that I played ball with who didn't make it to the NFL. Hey, man, what are you doing now? How do you handle your everyday life? And being vulnerable enough and knowing y'all good enough friends that he's going to give you the right information. So that's where I think you build up relationships in college with teammates, roommates, and if your O-line coach or position coach can get close enough to you, that could be a safety net for you whenever that day comes.
Well, I'm sure that you would be a great guy for all those college football, all those college kids that you guys have come in as offensive linemen. I know that, we had a guy come in and help for a year, and he was just like on a practice squad in an NFL team for 1 year. But to us, it was like, man, he's the guy. You'd listen to anything he said. So I'm assuming guys come and see you around and get to talk to you and bounce ideas off of you, and all the things that you did in football has got to be a huge person that they can lean on. And I'm sure a bunch of those kids are coming up to you asking you, different thoughts about different things. I'm not sure, again, how much you're allowed to help them with the football aspect of stuff, but I know if I was in that situation, you'd be someone that I'd be reaching out to if I knew, someone in my building was an NFL, veteran.
Yeah. The one thing that and you talk about helping out, the only bad part about being an analyst is you can't coach on the field. That was the hardest thing for me, to stand there for a year and knowing that I couldn't mix it up in a drill, knowing I could physically still get down and show them what I'm talking about and not being able to do that. That's hard as an analyst. So I'd have to try to show them on film or draw up something and say, hey, look, this is what he's looking for. You're not doing it. See how your hand's supposed to be over here? And you try to find little ways to get them to understand that. And it's really tough. You have to be creative. I learned that you got to really be creative because you ain't trying to break no rules and you ain't trying to get nobody in trouble. So that's the tough part about it. But like you said, I do have the guys come up to me a lot and ask questions. But I really try to build more of an off-the-field deal with them to try to get them to understand that, okay, say, for instance, you're the only kid from your area that has the opportunity to play at Auburn. Your family don't really have anything, and your mama couldn't pay for you to come into school. Tell me why you're not going to class. I don't understand that. Like I try to hit them at that level, and like, okay, we can work on the ball, but when you won't ever even get to the ball if you're not going to class. So football really isn't even an important factor right now. You're going to end up back in the same situation you just left and you fought hard to get out of. So let's take care of the other stuff first, and I'll do everything I can to help you out on that other part.
Coach, that's awesome. I remember a few of those conversations I had to have with guys too when they were, I was an analyst, and not only that, I had to go make sure they were in class.
Yes.
I'm sure you get to do some of that too. I was going to ask you, you talked about kind of, your life outside of football, and you've mentioned, the stuff you've done with, diabetes, you type 1, and talk a little bit about, how you've been able to, use kind of football as a tool and a vehicle, to help people in that situation.
It's actually the platform that God gave me as a former professional athlete to be able to talk about diabetes and reach people in that aspect has absolutely been amazing. It's been more of a blessing for me because I only knew a little bit while I was playing. I was just like you said, Coach Harper. It's the fact that of being somewhat bullheaded, you think you're invincible when you're at that age. So just give me the bare minimum, and I'll take my medicine like I need to, and I'll be fine. I didn't really research and try to learn more. And so I had my struggles in between that kind of affected my play to a degree. So once I got a chance to be an ambassador and learn and be around doctors, it changed my whole view on how diabetes affects every person in every aspect of your life when it comes to you thinking, your mood swings, your health, everything. Football really helped me because kids were drawn to the whole, he had opportunity to play and win 2 Super Bowls. So I used that as a tool to get next to the kids, to get them to understand, look, you aren't going to have a chance to make it through X, Y, and Z if you don't take care of yourself physically. This is how it affected me while I was playing. This is how it affected me mentally when I was done. And it isn't hard. You just got to commit to it like anything else and let it become part of your everyday duty. And it really helped me out. It honestly did. So just being able to do that now, being on a couple boards with Beyond Type 1 and working with JDRF and doing other things like that is still giving me an opportunity to learn more about what I'm living with and still try to inspire people.
Well, Coach, we actually had a defensive end this year on our high school team with diabetes, and he had, I believe, a patch somewhere like on his hip or somewhere, and it, and I know almost nothing about it. I should know a lot more. He's a defensive lineman though, so I didn't get really into it. But I know there are certain practices, certain workouts where he wasn't, where he needed to be that day, so he couldn't, participate, and was a good defensive end for us. But had some days like that. Do you work with any? And I don't say work with. Do you talk with any, athletes specifically that have it and have any things to tell them? I don't know if tips is the right word, or things that they need to know, things that they need to be doing so they can maximize their athletic potential while also protecting themselves and being healthy.
Yes, all the time. I'm going to ask you this. You said he had a patch on his hip. I don't know can you see this? Did he have something that looked like that? That's my CGM, and it reads your blood sugars, and it just sends it to either your phone or whatever. And he might have had that on that you were talking about. One of the things that I talk to athletes all the time, and I try to relate to them what I went through. When you're an athlete, adrenaline affects your blood sugars. Either it makes you go up high or it makes you bottom out. So you either need sugar or you got to take insulin to bring your sugar down. And it all depends on which range you're in. With me, it shot mine through the roof. So I was constantly having to take little bitty increment shots. I took 8 to 10 shots a game, every game I played in, just to get my blood sugar down. And physically, if you pay attention to it, when you feel good. My numbers, so you're not diabetic, I'm just try to explain it to you. Normal human being runs between 80 and 100. Yours is floating between 80 and 100 right now. Mine, on a good day, is about 120 to 130. As soon as the game starts, I'm at 180 to 200. By the end of the first quarter, I'm at 250 to 300. When it gets that high, I start forgetting to play. I can give you so many stories where Ben Roethlisberger has called to play, and when I got to the line of scrimmage, I completely forgot what he had just said. But my blood sugar was floating so high that I was out of it to a degree. And so you have to do that to try to get it down. If you can keep it below 200, that's where the doctor said you're almost like redlining the engine of a car. When it starts redlining, it gets hot and wants to shut down. If you keep it below 180, you're doing good. Now, a person who's low, they got to keep it up to where yours is, to where they don't bottom out. So it's little things like that you got to learn about yourself and be patient enough and get the coach and the trainers to understand the same thing. That's where I was blessed that my position coach, O-line coach, knew that I was dealing with it. All I had to do was raise my hand and say, hey, coach, give me a minute. And he would let me lead a drill and go fix it. Now, the toughest part about it was in a game. I couldn't come out of a game. You know, offensive linemen, we don't sub out. You know?
That's right.
So, honestly, no lie, diabetes and dealing with that taught me more mental toughness than anything I've ever dealt with in my entire life. We easily throw in the towel when things get hard. And I was in those situations, I couldn't throw the towel in and come out. And what did it for me is Alan Faneca deals with epilepsy. If he don't take his medicine, he could easily have a seizure. Jerome Bettis is an advocate for asthma. I've watched him have asthma attacks, and he's a Hall of Fame running back. You know, Ryan Clark had issues with the altitude where it affected his spleen and stuff. They had to take it out. Other guys I can bring up. So I looked at them like if they can play through these issues they're having in their lives and they're still playing at a high level, I can get myself under control and do the same thing. So those are the examples I try to give players who have it and are dealing with it and try to show them that you can still be successful, but you got to put the effort in and get the coaches and stuff to buy in. Hey, give them a chance. You got a really good player here, and if you just let him take care of himself and give him the tools to, he's going to be all right, or she's going to be all right.
Is this something that you know, came about later in life, or is this something that you had battled even high school, college? You just didn't know about it. You just thought, oh, I just feel a little off today. And then finally at some point, you know, the doctors came in and told you the answer. Because I even, and this is way off topic probably, but like there's certain days that I'd feel tired my whole life. I was kind of tired this day. And it wasn't until I was like 25 that I was like, oh, well, when I eat this stuff the day before, I feel a lot better than that. But I was young and didn't care about it. I just thought, well, some days I'm tired, some days I'm not. Sometimes I don't feel good. I never even thought there was a cause to this. Is this something that you'd always kind of dealt with and just didn't know what it was, or how did that work for you?
I was diagnosed in 2003, going into my second year in heading to training camp. I got diagnosed with diabetes 2.5 weeks before training camp. I had no issues as a kid or all the way through college. The only issues I ever had was I got diagnosed with high blood pressure in college. Most offensive linemen, we all a little bit too big anyway, so most of us flirting with high blood pressure anyway. That was the only issue I had. And it just hit my doorstep all of a sudden. I lost 45 pounds in 2.5 weeks. And I was hospitalized for a week. I completely lost my vision. Jeez. Like I was temporarily blind for an entire week. I could not see at all. And I was laid up in the hospital, 45 pounds lighter, looked like I was on drugs, big dark circles under my eyes, and it freaked me out. I had just turned 23 years old and did not know what was going on. My grandmother had type 2, and so we called it sugar. I didn't know what diabetes was at all. They said, hey, you have diabetes. What is that? And I had no clue, so it freaked me out. And once I got it under control after that first year and a half, I was okay. I had accepted it, and it was just what it was. And so it was something that happened to me later on in life, and I had no issues with it. I know people who are in their 50s now that are getting diagnosed with it, and it's just something that happens.
Coach, now, you know, getting back into football, and, you know, I know you have some aspirations. You know, what's kind of your goal? I know you've talked about, you know, wanting to get back to the NFL. You know, where do you kind of hopefully, you know, see yourself here in the next few years?
You know, it's something that's funny you asked that. My wife has always been on me about looking into the future. I struggle with that, looking, you know, where I want to be 5 years from now. And honestly, being realistic, the age that I'm at, I'm 41 years old. You know, you got to get a lot of experience for somebody to trust you at the major D1 level and professional level for you to be a position coach. So I know I got a few years of hopefully no more than about 3 or 4 more years of getting some experience under my belt, and I'll get an opportunity to be a position coach. That's what I'm hoping. So by the time I'm saying 45, 46 years old, I'll have my own position group. That's what I would like to see. Because I just really enjoy the sport, and I feel like I got a lot to give back to it, and just want to be around for it.
Have you seen much technique change from when you were playing in the NFL to kind of now what's being taught, or is it kind of still the same basic principles? Or I'm sure there's a few tweaks and things, but is there a big change of the major principles from when you were playing to now, or is it still fairly the same thing that it's been for the past, several years as far as some of the basics, fundamentals of offensive line play?
The basic fundamentals are pretty much the same as some of the techniques that are just out there. I was looking online today and studying some stuff, and I'm like, there's no way I would have tried that back in the day, because I feel like I would have got blowed up if I did that.
Yeah.
I think give you an example, I know you guys watch film, the tackles for Green Bay, they sit, and it's like they hop out and they grab. They don't punch. They just kind of almost like they bear hug and grab the guys. It's for them. There's no way I would teach a guy to do that and kind of expose your chest, but it's somewhere or another they do it and they get away with it. Some of the footwork that college teams are using now. If you're going against a penetrating defense, to me that's an issue. And so I have a hard time buying into some of the shuffle footwork on zone plays instead of that 45 and go, getting your head across. One thing I've learned too, they don't really teach getting your hat play side. To me, that is so key to getting a guy blocked. They're more worried about getting your hands in the right place and feet. If your hat's backside, that guy, he has the angle and the gap on you. My coach, he would up down the mess out of us if I wasn't play side. He really focused on that. And that was one of my pet peeves, especially as a player in the NFL. It's like I always looked at that play side shoulder, and I'm trying to get my backside ear over there. And when I was remotely successful at doing that, I did a decent job. Now times a guy can take that step and he think he got it, but all of a sudden he wants to start trying to wheel him. You don't even have your head front side to even get your hips around him. Your head is backside on his elbow. You have no shot if that guy's decent. So they don't press that point of doing that. So that's what I did on the side as an analyst. I always yelled at the guy, I said, dude, that was a good step, but you know why you didn't block him? You didn't get your head across. That was one of the first things you did not do. And he's nowhere near the athlete you are, but he beat you because he played the gap and he got over there because your head wasn't in the right place. So it's little things like that I see that coaches run through, and they miss the little stuff. Being sticklers about some of the little things.
I'm with you on hat placement, and I think and I could be way off, but I think what's kind of gone on is with all the head injury issues, it's almost like every offensive line coach is almost scared to talk about putting your head anywhere. And it's like, if I say put your head somewhere, then we're talking about putting your head into it, and we're trying to take a head out of it. And I've tried to morph at times away from using that, but there still just is some times where it is almost that easy to say, put your head over in that spot, and now they can't work through your head and you've got them. Or, I watched some of the really good centers in the NFL at times when they reach and it's like they're throwing their head first before anything goes. And I try to get away from it, but I almost can't, because I watch those guys and when they reach and what they're doing with that, and it's almost like they start with their head and then push off and do some different things. And so it's kind of a weird little deal that's going on right now. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, you made a good point with that. And that's, so you looking at film, that's some of still the technique stuff they work in the NFL. They still do the basic duck walk, side shuffle. They still, you duck walking under the chute, trying to keep your hips bent, doing drills where you got to get your head across, and even got to the point where we were doing it without helmets on. Like, if you don't get your head across here, you're going to get smacked in the face with the shoulder pad or whatever it may be. So you got to get your head over there. And it's emphasizing, like you said, throwing that head over there, which takes the rest of your body with you when you do that.
All right, Coach. So you've probably gone through 1,000 different drills with your different offensive line coaches. Can you think of, as a player, can you think of one of the drills that you absolutely hated and you still hate to this day and don't think that it was any good for you?
I think it's like bull in the ring, or what do we call it? We call it hookup. And it's basically one-on-one, and all you're doing is the guys just stalemating. I think it's a pointless drill because when you talk about keeping your head out of it, both the offensive defensive line, both heads slam together, and nobody's really trying to get their hat to one side or another. And all it is I'm trying to keep you from pushing me off the ball. And it's not really a play being ran. It's like, who is the strongest and who can get under you and leverage. Yes, but think about it. A normal play isn't ran that way. And a goal line, really, for the most part, the defensive line is going to the ground and they trying to get penetration. You rarely are going to hit a guy straight level and run him directly off the ball. I think that is the most ridiculous drill in the world. And why you keep doing it is pointless to do it. So I don't like that drill at all. That's like my number one I can't stand.
I would have to agree. Completely stupid. Coach, you're going back to the point of, getting hat across. I mean, I would imagine, obviously, NFL, with outside zone schemes and going against such great athletes, and if I'm going to be worth anything and get dudes, especially at that second level, I've got to be able to put my face on an angle to be able to block that dude. Because if I don't get my face to whatever my landmark is, I'm not going to have a prayer. Do you think, that might have been the reason why, it is so prevalent or whatever? I know they're not teaching it now, but back then, when you were playing and knowing that, dude, I'm going to get such great athletes and these guys move so fast. If I'm not going to get my body and my hat and my face in that position, I'm not going to have a prayer blocking this dude.
Yeah, I think it's true. What I was taught as a freshman is drilled in my head as an offensive line. When you're in your stance and you know that you got to reach a 3 technique and he's a penetrating 3 technique, my coach always taught me to pick a spot on the ground and run to it. Pick a spot outside of his knee, and that's what you're trying to get to the block. And you're trying to get your head over there to that spot. And he always taught, and that's what I always thought of, even when I was in the NFL. When I had a fast-flowing linebacker, and I knew I could not run him down, I'm looking 2 yards in the direction where I know the player's going to go, and that's what I'm running to. I'm not running at him because I know I can't keep up with him. So you pick your spots and you run to it, and let the back make you right. One of the things another thing that I really learned about running zone and blocking guys in the NFL, use their momentum against them. You're rarely going to take a guy and move him by sheer will. It just doesn't happen. So when he starts to flow, take him where he want to go. The back should be good enough to cut off of you. Yeah, you got a certain scheme the players ran up, but if you run an outside zone and that guy's flying to the outside, you're not going to cut him off. Get in his back hip pocket and throw him into the sideline. That's what our jobs were. And I blocked so many guys like that by just getting in his hip pocket and running my feet and then let the back cut up off me. That's just how, we learn how to do it.
Coach, that was some of my most embarrassing blocks were trying to get out, reach a linebacker that's coming. He's a little behind me. So I kind of try to do the turn back to get him reached.
Yes.
But now he's going full speed and I take it underneath the chin.
Yeah. I've had that happen to me a couple times too. I quickly to quit doing that. Quickly.
Well, Coach, you get to watch a lot of high school athletes from across the world even. What are some tips that you would give those guys when they're making their huddle highlight or whatever their highlight film is? What are, as an offensive lineman, even specifically, what are some tips that you give those guys? Because, as a high school coach, and I'm going to coach my guys, and I like to see them, running guys and planting them and putting them into the, sideline, whatever. That's kind of the cool offensive line thing to do. I don't always know, is that the thing though that the college level guys are looking at? What are some things that you would give those offensive line guys tips on for what they need to make sure is in their highlight film?
First thing I would say to you, number one, On contact, please do not come off with high pad level. Come off the ball, have some type of twitch about you. Work on your footwork, ladder drills all day long, running through the ladders, running through the rope, jump rope, having quick feet. Our line coach always taught us that you need to move like your feet's on fire. A guy who has heavy feet, maybe if it's just genetics, it ain't nothing you can do about it, but you can work on it. Quick feet, keep your pads down, and roll your hips. Try to run through them on contact. One of the biggest things that bother me the most about watching high school offensive linemen is that some of the guys are so much bigger and stronger than everybody. Their technique and effort is awful. They come off the ball and then they torque them and throw them down. To me, that's not playing. At the next level, you will not be able to do anybody else like that. So come off the ball, get your hands inside and run your feet and try to run over the top of him. I would teach a guy to step on his toes. If you can get your hips up next to him and like you're trying to step on your toes, you're going to pancake him eventually. That's what's going to happen. So just don't get used to being so much bigger and stronger than everybody and create bad habits where you're grabbing them and taking 2 steps and you're taking them and throwing them down. If I was an O-line coach, to me, every time you did that, that's 10 up downs. And then I'm mad at the official if you're not throwing a holding flag on that because you're creating the bad habits by letting him get away with that. I know it slows the game down, but that's not impressing me when I look at huddle films and I see guys grabbing them and torquing them, throwing them down. When I see a lineman running downfield on a string or his back has broke a run on the other side of the field and he's trying to get over and get involved and get in the block, that guy right there, he doesn't have to be a 5-star to me. That's what I want because you can't teach that. You can't teach that type of effort. I look for that. That's the first thing I look for is how much effort you give at the second and third level. If you can give me that type of effort, the rest of the stuff we can work with and fix because you can't teach that.
Well, Coach, kind of rolling up on an hour now. I think that's great, for those kids. And I think that it helps me as an offensive line coach, be able to tell them what are these guys looking for. But, kind of coming up on an hour now. And like you said, you've been on these Zooms for 8 hours a day. So we want to get you off here. But before we do, the thing I always like to ask guys is when you're watching another team's offensive line and you watch a lot of film, you're watching another team's offensive line, what are some things they'd be doing that would make you think highly of their offensive line coach?
How well they work together in sync. I'm an interior guy, and I'm always looking at the two centers, the center and the 2 guards. How well do they work in sync together? Because you solidify the pocket. I don't want the middle of my offensive line giving ground. I don't think you can't play football that way. Your front line can't be dropping back because the tackle has to drop too. And if the middle is given, quarterback has nowhere to go. So to me, I want my 3 inside guys to be absolute pit bulls. I want them to be nasty. I want them to fight and say, this line of scrimmage is mine and you are not getting any of it. I don't care what I have to do. So that's something that I really pay attention to when I'm watching the other team's offensive line and how well they communicate. Are they pointing out the backers? Are they saying something before the snap and communicating? That's big because the tackles, for the most part, they blocking one person. They blocking the defensive end or the stand-up buck backer. You ain't really got to tell him much unless he got to get somebody off the edge. He ain't communicating very, very much, to be honest with you. So those 3 inside guys need to know what's going on at all times. The 2 guards, to me, need to know what the center's doing and what his call is going to possibly be. Even if you don't make the call, they can correct him. So that's what I like seeing is seeing that orchestrate in the middle and how they play together.
Coach, man, it's been an absolute blast. I remember seeing you get drafted back, and I think it was, 2002?
Yes.
And was always a big fan, loved watching the Steelers and loved watching you guys play and run the ball. And it's been a blast, having you on and getting a chance to talk with you. And wish you nothing but luck, man, as it moves forward. I hope you hit those goals by the time you're 45, 46. Best of luck to you, man.
Well, hey, I really have appreciated listening to you guys and what y'all post. Y'all are doing a hell of a job. I really do think so. It's really helped my education of learning and seeing things differently. So y'all continue doing what you're doing. I definitely commend you on that. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to be on your show.